From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host Dave Perry, and we have a great show lined up for you today. As we all know, law enforcement and public safety extraordinarily important to the citizens of West Virginia, and we're very pleased to be joined here today by the Superintendent of the West Virginia State Police, one of the premier law enforcement agencies in the nation, Colonel Jan Cahill. And again, the West Virginia State Police celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. So, Colonel, welcome to the Capitol Report show.
Well, thank you, Bill, for having me.
You bet.
Dave, known these guys quite a while. Appreciate you having me here today.
You bet. And again, with the 100th anniversary, what a legacy, a very rich and long history and tradition associated with the standards of excellence with the West Virginia State Police. What have you all done as an agency or department this year to kind of acknowledge that milestone and accomplishment of 100 years serving the citizens of West Virginia?
Sure. This the 100th anniversary, this centennial year, it's been talked about really probably for 10 years. And so we've been really excited about it. We've had a lot of commemorative items came out that you see on the table here, yearbooks, calendars, commemorative knives, a sidearm, things like that. You know, we started again, obviously, in 1919, fourth oldest state police in the nation, and a very colorful organization with a storied history. People ask us all the time when we're on prisoner extraditions or at conferences or training, people are like, why the green uniforms? And you know, we started in 1919 with World War I veterans returning home, and they were asked, you know what, when you show up, bring your own uniform with you, and they say your own horse and your own sidearms. So that was kind of the origins of the green uniform. Usually with police work, you see a lot of blues, grays, and blacks, but we get asked about that frequently all over the country. And actually, a lot of our fellow states and colleagues in this line of work, they know that we wear the green uniform.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Currently, you have some 600 officers. And obviously, during your tenure, you've made some changes in equipment. And I think part of that equipment we have here today, and of those 600 officers, probably over 100 and some are wearing these new vests.
That's something we saw other state agencies and the municipal and county agencies wear. It's an outer carrier, and you can put the protective armor in that carrier. So instead of having that underneath your blouse, you have it over. And the manufacturer, that's actually our uniform that they put into that. And our line of thought on that, a lot of the guys really like them. I've heard a few say that they don't care for them as much. But our line of thinking on that was if that encourages one officer to wear body armor that otherwise wouldn't, then that's a win. And we've probably got well over 100 guys that are choosing to wear that type of body armor now. So we rolled that out this year. And like I said, a new sidearm and a little knife, calendars, books, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Great. Colonel, again, for our viewers that may not know an awful lot about the West Virginia State Police, you know, obviously you all have statewide jurisdiction. We have 55 counties in the state of West Virginia, a lot of ground to cover, and I know that, you know, the recruitment and retention of qualified troopers has always been an issue in the past. And what can you tell us about, you know, the total number of sworn personnel you have, you know, what your approach is in terms of geographic distribution of those officers, in terms of local detachments, those types of things as far as getting those types of resources out in our communities?
Well, first of all, the West Virginia State Police, it is a full-service organization. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when you think about police work or state troopers, people think highway patrol. And I remember one time talking to my brother about this. He said, well, most people associate the police with traffic enforcement because that's where the average good person runs into the police at. Everybody's sped down the road a little bit. Well, maybe not you two guys, but everybody has. And that's where you really see the police at. But we like to tell people, I mean, if you close your eyes and think of anything that's criminal out there, your larcenies, your sex crimes, your drugs, your assaults, identity theft. We investigate everything. And I tell people lots of times when you see a trooper on the road pulling somebody over, probably more likely than not, lots of times that's when he's on his way to something else, to go interview a suspect or a victim. And so it's a full service organization. We maintain the West Virginia State Police Training Academy. It's almost like Marine boot camp. Every officer in the state attends our academy, whether they're city, county, state, campus police, natural resource police, used to be the DNR. Everybody goes to the State Police Academy. Everybody uses the West Virginia State Police Forensic Lab, and we're pretty proud of that, and I'll mention that later, with the services they do that we provide for every department in the state. Vacancies, to go back to your original question, that's always a concern, really more so lately, and it's just not state police. You can talk to our colleagues at any city, county, state agency throughout West Virginia, and in other states. It seems like law enforcement jobs, whether it's law enforcement or firefighters or nurses or teachers,
Right.
some of the jobs that seem like made America great, I swear it seems like the newer generation, they want to be YouTube stars and write blogs or get paid to play video games, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. You kind of, we realized the last time we had a cadet class, we had less than 200 people show up, and historically we would have had 1,000 show up. So this time, to be honest with you, I think we kind of checked our egos at the door and realized, hey, we've got to saturate social media and be in print, television, and radio. We've went to out-of-state law enforcement expos, and we did regional testing, meaning it used to be people would come to the State Police Academy and test. We went to Martinsburg and Morgantown. So this time our applications are way up, so we feel really good about that.
Sounds good.
Of course, the governor's been very good to the West Virginia State Police in that before you became colonel at this time, I think there'd been no classes, that they were down to about 400 men strong.
That's correct. We had not had a class in the state police in almost 4 years. And historically, we would have a class once a year and sometimes twice a year. And we weren't down in the 400 ranks. We had dropped in the upper 500s, but we had been close to 700 people at one time. And so we dropped down into the fives, and we were able to graduate a class last November and in this past June 28th. So, but we currently stand at 625 people, and we have an authorized strength of 660. And that number really needs to be at least 700. So vacancies are always a problem. But yes, we thank the governor for that. We've had back-to-back classes, and we're hiring another class after the first of the year, which will probably have about 50 cadets in it.
Also, out of that 600 and some, of course, those are uniformed officers and so forth. You have a large number of civilian employees as well that you're responsible for.
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's mechanics, office assistants, dispatchers, our forensic lab personnel, we're probably a little over 1,000 altogether. So it's a very, very large organization.
Let me ask again, if a young person out there is watching this show and not real certain about what career options they may have and may be considering a career in law enforcement, what would you say to a young man or a young lady who's interested in or considering a career with the state police? What are some of those benefits and joining an organization obviously with 100 years of tradition, that's worth something too.
I would say the same thing I did to our last graduating class. It might sound cliche, but this is a job where you can absolutely make a difference. And we've had officers within a year or two in the ranks. They're on CNN or one of the news shows on a case they're working on. I mean, it's never the same thing day over day. It's a different day each day you report to duty. It's an adrenaline rush at times. The job can be kind of at times uneventful. Every officer will tell you that, but it can go to 0 to 60, as you know, Bill, in a half a second. And it's just really interesting work. And it's state police is a unique fraternity. It's almost like being in the Marine Corps or something. I was in the Marines, and your retired members, we have, I think, 800 strong retired members. They're always checking in with you and then seeing what's going on, and
Sure.
it's a really unique brotherhood.
Yeah, that's. Well, let me ask you again. Part of your experience, you were sheriff of Greenbrier County for a period of time, and And I think in West Virginia, the numbers, there are more county and municipal officers than there are state police officers. So, you know, obviously cultivating and maintaining good, solid working relationships with local units of government, sheriff's departments, city officers throughout the state, pretty important stuff. And as superintendent, you know, what do you do to try to encourage the sort of that meshing of those resources that, quite frankly, in a lot of communities we just don't have enough of. But that interaction is important.
The first thing that comes to mind, like you mentioned, I actually retired in 2012 from the state police, and then kind of got talked into running for sheriff in Greenbrier County, and got elected and actually re-elected for a few days into a second term before I came back here. But one thing that comes to mind, especially with the opioid epidemic we've seen in West Virginia, is establishing these task forces. And I did that when I was the sheriff, and that brings your city, county, and state officers together. Where, you know, it helps with deconfliction, and you share information, and you realize what everybody's working on. Anytime you can bring your resources together, and you don't worry about who's on the 6 o'clock news, you just get more things done. And we have that all over the state, combinations of city, county, and state officers working together. And I think by and large they work together well.
Absolutely. And again, with 911 systems, it's kind of a reactive environment in terms of dispatching calls for service.
Correct.
And but again, if you need a police officer, it doesn't matter if they wear green, gray, or blue, as long as
if you're on that call, you don't care what the guy's uniform color is that he's with you. You know, you're glad to have the help.
That's exactly right. Well, that's certainly important.
Colonel, you talked about the state police began back in 1919. And of course, you've had a number of years' experience as well. What kinds of changes or significant changes or do you feel is different over the years, or what's changed in terms of police work?
Well, like I said, we started with guys bringing their own uniforms and their own sidearm and horse. Then we transitioned to a modern state police that investigates internet crimes. We have our own aviation, and a training academy and a forensic laboratory that are among the best in the nation. So it's definitely changed over the years, as you can imagine.
Again, you made some reference earlier about our opioid and drug substance abuse and addiction problems throughout the state, but certainly we have some pockets that are worse than others. But you know, my experience has been it is truly impacting and affecting the culture of a lot of our communities and having a very serious impact, I think, on the future of West Virginia. We have to break this down and get it right. So, you know, obviously, from your perspective as superintendent, you know, you're called upon to be a piece of that puzzle. How do we align our resources? A lot of people say we can't arrest our way out of this problem. We have to begin to grow those intervention and treatment programs. You know, from your perspective, you know, what is it perhaps that we need to kind of reload on and try to go to work on solving this very serious problem?
Well, first of all, like you said, the opioid epidemic, I mean, there's not a county in this state that's not affected and infected in a really significant way. And the drug situation, it does not discriminate either. You guys have seen that. I think lots of times in the past we thought it was just somebody that was a troll living under a bridge or something. But I mean, these are professional people. These are professional people's children. It does not discriminate. I saw that as sheriff. I saw that, of course, in the current role. It has impacted. You know, every one of our sections in our forensic lab is affected by the. You know, you might just think, oh, it goes to the drug section. Well, no, it goes to latent prints because someone broke into a building, you know, because they were trying to get money for drugs. And as you said earlier, I think any person in a leadership position, city, county, state, federal, will tell you, yeah, just to think we're going to arrest our way out of this and throw away the key, that's really not the answer. That's not really proven to be successful. Now, that's not to say these criminal opportunists, as I call them, that come in maybe from a Detroit or somewhere, yeah, we're nailing those folks. But absolutely, I think the answer is, early intervention, your education, your treatment and therapy. You've got to have that as part of the equation. I mean, anybody that thinks no on that is probably not real involved with this or seen the people we have.
No doubt. It impacts and affects our economy, our workforce participation rates, just a lot of complex matters related to that. But we're going to have to go ahead and take a break, and again, we're talking with Colonel Jan Cahill, Superintendent of the West Virginia State Police. 100 years of proud service to the citizens of the great state of West Virginia. So we're going to take a break, and Dave and I will be right back. So stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber & Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt & Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report as we continue our discussion with Colonel Jan Cahill, Superintendent of the West Virginia State Police. Again, the State Police celebrating 100 years of service to the citizens of the state of West Virginia. And Colonel, again, law enforcement is the kind of profession and occupation where, it's important for citizens to have confidence in the integrity of an agency, and when you look at the service focus, you have to have the people behind you, and occasionally, you have a bad actor that might be an outlier that goes and does something inappropriate, which holds with it the potential to sort of taint or otherwise affect public perception concerning the rest of the agency, and that's unfortunate. But in your role as superintendent, what steps do you all have in terms of your policy standards for professional conduct? How do you ensure in the public that our police officers have that type of respect and integrity to get the job done?
Well, first of all, you're exactly right. This is a public service, public relations, customer service type job, and we try to reinforce with our younger folks all the time. The cell phones have kind of changed everything. Cell phones and Facebook, how people connect. And I'll transition into your question here. We tell people all the time, when you're standing in line at an Arby's or a Burger King or Walmart checking out, engage and talk to the people around you. Put that phone down. And I'm probably as guilty as anybody, you two guys, but those things can absolutely turn you into a zombie.
Right.
And I think people always appreciated their police and the state police, and if these were people that could approach us, you have to be approachable and trustworthy. And so we are constantly reinforcing this as a public relations thing. It's a customer service job. We have our own professional standards unit on television. That would be internal affairs, and I can tell you it is so easy for someone to make a complaint on you nowadays. We make it easy. I mean, it's if you've got a question about an officer's actions, and our complaints are at an all-time low, and I tell people all the time, you can fact check that. You can look at where we were in the hundreds at one time maybe several years ago. I think came in this year maybe around probably 100, and that includes everything: chargeable accidents, when we hit a deer, it gets assigned a number, someone saying they maybe saw you speeding down the highway, or rude on a telephone conversation. I mean, just about any little thing. Those numbers are very small. And yes, you're correct. Every agency is going to have their hiccups or your warts, or occasionally, however you want to say it. But I can tell you this: in my almost 3 years in this capacity of this job, I've probably averaged about 3 situations a year that I do step back and I'm like, gosh, what was this person thinking? But 3, to dumb down the math, 3 out of 600 would shake out to half of 1%. What agency in America wouldn't love to have that ratio? I've said this before. I've got a friend that's an athletic director, and it reminds me, he said something to me one time that's very similar to what I'm trying to say now. He said, I'll have 400 student athletes in the student athlete community, and if one person messes up and it's on the front page, that's everybody from the football team to the tennis team is branded like that. So,
That's right.
so when you're in a high-profile position, that kind of comes with the territory. But we feel pretty doggone good about our number of complaints that come in. Yeah, you'd like it to be zero, but I mean, is that going to happen whether you work at
impossible in the
if you work at a school or a hospital or a pharmacy or a Coca-Cola plant? That's probably not going to happen. But we feel like we deal with them immediately, and it is a very, very small percentage. But good question.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Colonel, several times you've mentioned the forensic lab. And I know when you first took over 3 years ago, there was a backlog of about 6,000 cases. And of course, I understand you had more employees then than you have now. And I think that number's been reduced significantly because of what you've done.
Yes. Pretty much the first week I walked in, I heard about this backlog. It was just about 5,000 cases. And I had been out of the state police for almost 5 years, although I had continued in law enforcement as the sheriff. And so I learned we was at almost 5,000, but I'll tell you what, it wasn't really hard to understand. Our number of personnel, our forensics analysts and technicians, that number had fallen to 33. And we were able, we worked with the governor's office, and we were able to establish a career progression system, a clear career pathway for these folks. And we were able to get our numbers up to 53 forensic technicians and analysts. And we've seen our number now of backlog cases is around 1,600. So we've had a dramatic drop. And we put a career progression system in because we're competing with other people that try to, I mean, other state police labs across the nation will try to grab some of our people. And so we've got a pathway now that's it's promotions, incentives, and of course pay increases. So we feel pretty good about that. That's a significant drop. And as you and I said earlier, you're always going to have a little bit of a backlog. While we've been having this interview, we've taken cases in, and we provide that service. Our state police forensic lab, it's nationally accredited. It provides free service for the 800 different departments and agencies throughout the state that uses our lab for forensic analysis. No charge, again, and we're really proud of that. And that comes right out of the state police budget, and only 20% of those cases are state police cases. So we're providing that service for all the other agencies, and we're pretty proud to have that backlog from 5,000 to 1,600. I don't know what the magic number is. I mean, it's not going to be zero, but I feel like if you got under probably 1,000, that would probably be really good because, like I said, cases are coming in all the time. And again, with the drug situation, it affects every one of the disciplines in our lab.
No doubt. And again, for our viewers, the state police is a division, I guess, of the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, which includes several different agencies. In your roots in Greenbrier County, no doubt you're aware we've had some real natural disasters in more recent years that truly just devastate communities. When I think of White Sulphur Springs and Rainelle and some of those communities over that way, the ability to respond and be ready to those types of events extraordinarily important. And I know we have the Office of Emergency Services, command posts, sort of putting together those joint operation centers. I guess part of the mission of the state police, you're called upon to do a variety of different things, but what is your view with respect to the role during those types of events for the state police?
Well, I was in the sheriff capacity during the June 23rd, 2016, and then that was just a Herculean effort, really, from all the first responders, all the police agencies, and the EMTs, the National Guard came in to help us with searching for folks. I believe my numbers are correct. There was 23 people perished statewide, and 16 of those was in Greenbrier County. And I've said this multiple times over the last couple of years. Unless you were there, you would think we were exaggerating or embellishing a little bit. The volume of water and some of the waters that were going through the streets in White Sulphur looked like you could whitewater raft on them. The communities from White Sulphur all the way to Rainelle, Rupert, all points in between, Caldwell, obviously Caldwell. I mean, it was something. It took us 7 weeks to recover all the bodies, and we had one victim that traveled 33 miles from her residence to where she was found, 33 miles. It was absolutely unbelievable, but to answer your question, all the agencies came together. Everybody was like, "Want to get this done. We recover everyone to give the families some closure." And I'd be lying if I said that there was a couple of times I had doubts. Like, are we going to be able to find? There was two in particular that, gosh, we had this gentleman out of Pocahontas County that had a bloodhound. And if that ever made me a believer in bloodhounds, two of them that were located, I think, would probably still be where they were found, if not for that. And that guy came from Pocahontas County. But we had volunteers coming from all over the state and out of state. But that was, they call it a 1,000-year storm, and I hope it's 2,000 years before we have another one.
Yeah.
But everyone worked together. It was, as I said, it was a Herculean task to get everything done. And at least everyone was recovered. As I said, when you have someone that travels 33 miles from their residence, I think that would let the viewers realize what kind of situation you were looking at.
No doubt. And Mother Nature has a way of reminding us from time
They're
to
in
time
charge.
who's really in charge.
They're in
That's
charge.
For sure. Well, Colonel, we have a print behind us that I think we maybe want to take a quick look at, again, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the West Virginia State Police. And I mean, when I look at the design quality and things that went into that, boy, that just kind of says it all. Again, you're talking about the background sort of after post-World War I and the green uniforms and campaign hats.
Right.
And again, I think a profile for a law enforcement agency, Dave, that's recognized in all 50 states in the Union. We have every reason in the world in West Virginia to be proud of our state police.
Absolutely, and of course, Colonel talked about that adrenaline rush. And I see years ago you had the motorcycles, and I understand you've brought the motorcycles back to the West Virginia State Police.
Yeah, one time I ride motorcycles, and at one time we had more bikes than cars, and of course bikes and horses. That was part of our tradition. Yes, we brought that back this year. They're a great-looking bike, and we're using it for special events, funerals, ball games, parades, festivals. But I'll tell you, it gives your organization some pop. It's kind of like the Navy's Blue Angels or the Air Force Thunderbirds, or having the Army Golden Knight parachute team, or color guards. It just gives your organization some pop. People get a kick out of those, and that's part of our heritage.
This has been the West Virginia Capitol Report.